Hello and a very warm welcome back to my YouTube channel. Now, I've recently come back from Portugal where I finally had a nice holiday. I also specifically went to the city of Porto to watch the Champions League final. And in all honesty, I was not going there to examine the property market, but I was surprised with what I saw. So I actually looked into this market, and I'm going to give you 10 reasons why potentially investing in real estate in the city of Porto could be a good investment. So number one, as soon as I arrived, I was impressed by the airport. And this leads me to what I think is a very good thing about Porto, the excellent infrastructure. So as well as the airport, you have 6 metro lines. Now, for a city which isn't, shall we say, a huge city, that's impressive. Also, in Porto, you have a number of prestigious R&D and technology institutions, ultra-fast broadband, and what I liked as well, as I moved around the city, there were plenty of free Wi-Fi spots. Indeed, actually somebody told me in Porto that there was well over 100 of these in the city. Also, it has an excellent healthcare system. Number two, I want to talk about the highly skilled workforce. Now, more than a quarter of the population of Porto have a university degree. But what impressed me most whilst I was there was the linguistic skills. Now, most of the people in Porto speak English, but not only the young generation, a lot of the older generation spoke very good English as well. And a few of the youngsters I spoke to were multilingual. So I spoke to a few who actually spoke 3 to 4 languages. Number three, what's also good about Porto, it's got a very low crime rate. And Portugal in general, I have to say, has low crime rate and has political stability. Number four, Porto is in a strategic location, so it's easily accessible from the rest of Europe, Africa, and the United States. Number five, let's go to the reasonable prices. Now, for what I think is quite an excellent city, well developed, the prices are not very high. So I looked in at property in various areas. Now, what I consider the most beautiful and best area is Ribeira area, and actually around there is actually, I think, a World Heritage Site. Property costs are around 4,000 to 4,500 euros per square meter, but it is the best part of the city. You have plenty of bars, restaurants, and it is the place where Chelsea and Manchester City fans did congregate and had a good sing-along. So I actually enjoyed it there, and I think prices, although higher than the rest of the city, are not too bad for prime location. I also looked at Boa Vista, which is central as well, and there the property is around 4,000 euros per square meter, but it's a good area for shopping. Again, here you have excellent transport links, and it is, as well as Ribeira, it is the historic part of the city. Now, for cheaper options, I looked at Foz do Douro, which again is where you have the beaches, and it's also not too far from the centre. Here property is around 2,300 euros per square metre, and I think that's pretty good value. I also looked across the river, so one part you have Ribeira on the River Douro, and if you cross you have Vila Nova de Gaia, and property around here is not too expensive. So the further away, obviously, you move away from the river, the less expensive it is. So on average, it's about 1,300 to 1,500 euros per square meter. And I think that's not too bad. I think that's pretty cheap. And it's where you have all the port wine cellars. And again, I'll say it's not too far from the city centre. But what I think is what I thought was the best value place to invest is an area called Campana. Now, actually around here, you can find property for less than 1,000 euros per square meter. I thought that was amazing value for money. And it is, although it's not the best part of the city, and it is a bit away from, it is away from the city centre. But that said, it is up and coming part of the city centre, and it's where you have the main railway station to other parts of Portugal. So it's here where you'd get a lot of trains to, let's say, other parts of Portugal, let's say Lisbon, the Algarve, etc. So, number 6, I want to come to the yields. Now, I have to admit, real estate agents, like in many parts of the world, they exaggerated the yields, and I was getting quoted about 7 to 8%. I think this is nonsense. I think yields are closer to about 4.5 to 5% from what I could see on real estate agents and other places where you could rent. And I did have since I've been back, I've also looked on the internet as well. So this is not too bad. And I compared it with Lisbon. I think yields in general in Porto are about 1% gross higher than Lisbon, more or less. So although, again, as I said, don't listen to the real estate agents, the yields are actually not too bad. Now, number 7, I want to compare Porto with Lisbon. As I said, yields are higher in Porto than Lisbon by approximately, as I was saying, about 1% higher. But I want you to listen to this statistic when I compare Porto to Lisbon. So real estate in Lisbon is about, on average, 70% higher than Porto. But the salaries are only about 20% higher in Lisbon than they are in Porto. So this would imply that Porto has more growth in it, or at the very least, I don't think property here will go down. So please do bear that in mind when you compare the two major cities in Portugal. Number 8, I just want to say in Portugal, there are no restrictions on foreign ownership. Again, that's a major advantage of investing in Porto and indeed any other part of Portugal. Number 9, I want to come to the taxation. Now, in Portugal, there is no inheritance tax. However, there is a stamp duty of 10% that you have to pay on Portuguese assets. But the good news is, if you are leaving it to either a spouse or your children, you won't pay this stamp duty. So that's a major advantage. Now let's come to rental income tax. So one thing I was told by one of the agents, and I think I've pretty much verified it, if you rent short term, so let's say Airbnb, as a non-resident, you'll only pay, in effect, 8.75% tax. And this is for apartments and villas. And if you have like a guest house, apparently, you only pay 3.75%. Now, again, get yourself an accountant, get yourself a lawyer. But this does look very interesting to rent short term. So if this applies if your business is, if you're getting rental income of less than 200,000 euros a year, which I'm sure most of you will be in that bracket. Now you will, I believe, have to register yourself as a business if you're turning over more than 10,000 euros per year. So if you're getting more than 10,000 euros a year, you'll have to register this as a business. And also, if you are getting more than 10,000 euros a year, you will have to register for VAT. But apparently, a couple of people did tell me it's not an issue, because when you invoice your clients or people you're renting out to on a short-term basis, VAT is only 6%, and your costs, your operating costs, the VAT generally will be 23%. So you'll actually be in credit. So you shouldn't have to worry about this. But again, get yourself an accountant, get yourself a lawyer. But this does look very, very, very interesting. Now, long-term doesn't sound as good, because the actual tax is 28%. But there are deductions for things like plumbing, electrical expenses, expenses of maintenance of the common areas of the building. So there's deductions for municipal taxes, buildings insurance. So again, this is quite good. But what I also found out as well, the longer you rent it out to somebody, the less rental income tax you're going to pay. So if you're renting for 2 to 5 years, it's 26%. 5 to 10 years, 23%. If you're renting for between, let's say your contract between 10 and 20 years, it's 14%. and more than 20 years, it's actually 10%. Now, I guess this is a long time, but if you do intend buying and renting for the very, very long term, the longer you rent, the less rental income tax you're going to pay. So this is, I think, also very interesting to look into. And then finally, let's also look at capital gains tax as well. So the good thing here, there are deductions for buy, sell costs and enhancement costs as well. But 28% does sound high. And whilst I was actually there, I was told there was a difference between being a resident and a non-resident. So if you're a non-resident and not in from an EU country, I was told you would pay 28% capital gains tax, which did sound a lot. But if you were a resident of Portugal, a resident, let's say in Porto, or you were from an EU EEA country, you'd only pay 50% of the capital gain, and you'd be taxed at a marginal rate between 14.5% to 48% plus 5% solidarity tax. So you would be in a better position if you were either Portuguese, a resident, or if you're a non-resident from an EU or EEA country. But subsequently to this, I found out that the judicial authorities had overruled the actual IRS, so the tax authorities, and said it didn't matter whether you were a resident or a non-resident, you'd still only have to pay 50% of the capital gains tax of 28%. So, and not of the 28%, but you'll pay 50% of the capital gain at the marginal rate. So it's good. I actually looked into this, because if you are deciding to go ahead and buy, this is quite, capital gains tax is always very important. So please do look into this. And apparently, I think for the last year or so, if you have sold your property in Portugal, you may be able to get a refund on some of the extra capital gains tax you've paid. So very useful if you've sold in the last year as well. And again, please get yourself a good lawyer to look into this and a good accountant. Finally, number 10, Forbes in 2020 did state that Porto is one of the 6 cities you should invest in. So I've given you 10 good reasons to invest. Now, again, as ever, we must look at the negatives, and I have a few negatives. So unfortunately in Portugal, there is a wealth tax. So if you buy a property as an individual for over 600,000 euros, or a couple above 1.2 million euros, you'll have to pay a wealth tax. And this is, let's take if you're a single person, you've bought a property for over 600,000 euros, you will have to pay a wealth tax of 0.7%. And it's actually on a portion over €1 million, the wealth tax goes up to 1%. So that's a definite disadvantage. And as well in Porto, the unemployment rate is over 11%, and that's not good. And as well, I do believe from July 2021, the Golden Visa scheme will not apply in Porto. And indeed, I think it will not apply in Lisbon, the Silver Coast, and also the Algarve. But I will double check, and please do double check that as well. So that is a disadvantage. Also, we have to mention a few other disadvantages. So Portugal does have a very low birth rate of around 1.3. But having said that, the population of Porto is increasing every year, albeit very, very slightly. And also we have to say about Portugal, the growth rate, so the GDP growth rate has been pretty much unspectacular from 2015 to 2019, so just over 2%. I guess you can say it's not too bad. And finally, I want to talk about one of my favorite pet hates, as you all know if you watch my other videos. The total government debt to GDP in Portugal is now over 130%. That's very high, and we have to say that's a major disadvantage to investing in Portugal. Nevertheless, I have to say I was impressed with Porto, and I think if you do invest, there's very little downside in the city of Porto, and I think you'll do okay. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed watching this video. If you do like my videos, please do subscribe. Please, if you do find this useful, hit the like button, and I'll see you very soon on the next video. Thank you and bye.